Hello and welcome to your Christmas Carol revision video and lesson on A Christmas Carol, Context and Plot. You will need all of the equipment that's in the top left-hand corner there. So a black pen, a green pen, a highlighter, some paper and a ruler. And now I would like you to hit the pause button, put your date and title as I've done in the bottom left-hand corner there, get all that equipment ready to go, and then we can begin with a 5 a day. Okay, you guys know what to do with the 5 a day. It's pretty straightforward. There's quite a few gap fill tasks there. So your task is to hit the pause button, complete that 5 a day, and then once you're done, hit play again, and I will reveal the answers for you. Okay, great start to the lesson, guys. Well done. Are you ready for the answers? I am revealing them as soon as you guys have got your green pens ready. And now. Okay, so you can just hit the pause button and go through and self-mark those. There's some real key vocabulary in there, such as avarice, benevolence, the Industrial Revolution, that you guys are going to want to re-familiarise yourself with. Don't worry if you've forgotten the meaning of some of those words, because we're going to go through them in today's recap lesson. Okay, how many did you get? Did you get 5 out of 5? I bet some of you did, because you guys have been amazing recently. Okay, so let's look at today's learning objectives. So our objectives today are to recall and revise the plot of A Christmas Carol. And secondly, we're then going to recall and revise the context of A Christmas Carol. Okay, so we're going to start with a retrieval practice that is all based around the plot. When I say plot, I mean things that happen in the storyline, really get you to remember some of those basic storyline elements. Okay, so if you could just set up your page like mine is to the right-hand side there with the subtitle, A Christmas Carol Revision, Context and Plot, and then numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This plot revision quiz is out of 5. Let's see how many you get. Okay, here we go then. These are going to be relatively quick fire, so be ready to just jot the answer down in on your paper or your knowledge organizer. So the task is for you to tell me in which stave. Okay, I will give you a little clue at the beginning. There are 5 staves in total. Okay, so in which stave did the ghost of Christmas present show ignorance and want to Scrooge? So basically, is that stave 1, stave 2, stave 3, stave 4, stave 5? What can you remember? Okay, I'm going to reveal that answer in about 10 seconds. In the meantime, you just write down which stave you think it is in. Great. Okay, and the answer is stave 3. Excellent. So give yourself a tick if you got stave 3. All right, that's a really important moment in the novel because ignorance and want represent the sins of the Victorian capitalist class there. Okay, now that you've got the idea, that was number 1. Here's number 2. In which stave did the philanthropists visit Scrooge in order to ask him to donate money to the poor? Okay, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to write down which stave you think that happened in. Okay, are you ready for the answer to be revealed? It was, of course, stave 1, right at the very beginning. Just a quick recap on that vocab then. So a philanthropist is someone who helps others through charity. So you remember those portly gentlemen came to Scrooge to ask for money. And because it's in stave 1, right at the beginning, when Scrooge is extremely avaricious and devoted to mammon, he obviously refused. All right, number 3 then. In which stave did the ghost of Christmas yet to come show Scrooge his doomed future unless he changes his heretical ways? Which stave did that happen in? You have got 10 seconds. Okay, that was, of course, in stave 4. Now, a lot of you might have thought that was in the last stave, but that's not quite right. It is the stave before last, stave 4. Heretical, meaning going against the will of God. So all of Scrooge's decisions about, worshipping money, all those kind of sins that he commits are heretical. Okay, so I believe this is the final one. Did the Ghost of Christmas Past use? Sorry, in which stave did the Ghost of Christmas Past use the power of nostalgia to bring about a change in Scrooge? Which stave did that happen in? You've got 10 seconds. And the answer is, of course, stave 2. And just a quick vocab reminder there as well. So nostalgia is a sentimental feeling for a period in the past. So he takes Scrooge to his old boarding school. He also takes him to the moment where him and Belle parted ways. We do have one more. So here is the absolute final one in our plot recall. In which stave did Scrooge finally achieve his redemption? Okay, you got 10 seconds. And of course, the stave that Scrooge achieved his redemption was in stave 5. So redemption is the action of being saved from a sin. So Scrooge goes through this metamorphosis, this transformation, which redeems him in the eyes of God. He achieves that redemption because he has changed his ways. All right, fantastic. Guys, just have a quick add up of how many you got for me. Okay, so what was your score? Hopefully you got 5 out of 5, but if you didn't, don't worry. Hopefully that was a great way of just recapping and revising some of the key things that happen in the A Christmas Carol story. Just a quick reminder of our objectives then. The first objective there, to recall and revise the plot of A Christmas Carol. We've just done that in that retrieval practice. And then the second learning objective, to recall and revise the context of A Christmas Carol, is what we're going to be moving on to now. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some key contextual points, and then there's going to be a check for understanding at the end of each one. So the Industrial Revolution is a key part of the historical context that we need to know. So what did the Industrial Revolution mean? Well, it meant that there was a population explosion in cities, in particular London, which is where Dickens was based. It meant that there were less people working in rural jobs and more people working in factories, and that was a shift, that was a change in society. The divide between the rich and the poor became greater than ever before. You had people who were working for factory owners who were getting paid very little wage, barely a living wage, and then you had the very, very rich and wealthy, and that gap was bigger than ever, and that's what Dickens really despised. And finally, there were horrific living and working conditions for the working class because of the Industrial Revolution. So that's why Dickens was so against some of the things that happened during this time. Quick check for understanding then. Which of these statements is correct about the Industrial Revolution? Is it number 1, the explosion of the Industrial Revolution accelerated the migration of the population from the city to the country? Number 2, the explosion of the Industrial Revolution accelerated the migration of the population from the country to the city? Or is it number 3, the explosion of the Industrial Revolution decelerated the migration of the population from the country to the city? So is that number 1? Is it number 2? Is it number 3? You've got about 5 seconds thinking time. And the answer is, of course, number 2. Okay, so that population explosion meant that people were it accelerated the growth of migration from the country to the city, because that's where the jobs were. Okay, people stopped working in rural jobs and began working more in cities. Okay, so the New Poor Law is next. A quick recap on that. The Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, otherwise known as the New Poor Law, established the workhouse system. Now, instead of providing a refuge for the elderly, sick and poor, and instead of providing food or clothing in exchange for work in times of high unemployment, workhouses became a sort of prison system for people that were unable to fend for themselves. The poor, even the sick, old or dying, were treated punitively, as if their predicament was entirely of their own making and they were deserving of punishment. Okay, so they were treated, if you were poor, it was like it was a punishment to go to the workhouse because that was your own fault. Okay, that's what the Victorian capitalist classes believed anyway. The workhouse system was absolutely hated by the working class, and people did everything they could to avoid becoming subject to it. They definitely did not want to go and work in the workhouse. Usually that meant awful living and working conditions. Quick check for understanding then. Which of these statements is correct? The new poor law established a new prison system in the cities of the UK. Number 2, the new poor law established a new system of employment for any poverty-stricken people who were struggling to find work. And number 3, the new poor law established a new system of workhouses that were based on punitive measures for any people that found themselves in poverty. Okay, just reread those. You've got about 10 seconds thinking time. And the answer absolutely is number 3. Okay, so the new poor law established a system of workhouses, and those workhouses were absolutely hated by the working class. And Dickens himself, as we'll see later, was sent to work in a bootblacking factory in order to pay off his father's debt. Okay, so a key concept here is Malthusian attitudes, which I know you guys will be familiar with. So just a quick recap here. Thomas Robert Malthus, a wealthy economist, argued in his essay on the principle of population in 1798 that population growth would always outpace food supply, resulting in unavoidable and catastrophic poverty and starvation. Okay, so he felt that the number of people living in the world would always outpace the amount of food that could be provided. No help should be given to the hungry, because to help them allowed further breeding and made matters worse by increasing surplus population, a phrase I know you guys will be familiar with. Famines and epidemic diseases accomplished natural population control, and man should not intervene. In his pamphlet, The Crisis, Malthus argued that any man unable to sustain himself had no right to live, much less participate in the development of society. Okay, so absolutely brutal kind of viewpoint that was very popular, not just with Thomas Malthus, but with the Victorian capitalist class at the time Dickens was writing. So which of these statements is correct then? Thomas Malthus believed that population growth might outpace food supply. Thomas Malthus believed that famine and diseases did not do enough to help population control. Or is it number 3? Thomas Malthus believed that any man unable to feed themselves did not deserve to live. You've got about 10 seconds thinking time. And of course, it is number 3. All right, so he believed that any man unable to feed themselves did not deserve to live. And Scrooge is a representation of those Malthusian attitudes in the beginning of the novel. Really important to remember that's at the beginning, because he goes through that metamorphosis and transformation throughout. Okay, Charles Dickens' life then. So this is the final section we're going to do before a gap fill task. Charles Dickens' father, John Dickens, always lived beyond his means and was imprisoned for debt in Southwark in 1824. 12-year-old Charles was removed from school and sent to work at a bootblacking factory, earning 6 shillings a week to help support his family. Imagine that, younger than you guys, 12 years old. His childhood poverty and sense of abandonment was a heavy influence on Dickens's later views on social reform and the world he would create through his fiction. So social reform meaning like the way he wanted to change society. Okay. Quick check for understanding then. Which of these statements is correct? Dickens's childhood poverty and sense of abandonment was a heavy influence on his later views on social reform. Dickens' Malthusian beliefs were a heavy influence on his later views on social reform. Or is it number 3? His childhood education and sense of abandonment was a heavy influence on Dickens' later views on social reform. You've got about 10 seconds thinking time. And the answer is, of course, number 1. Okay, careful not to slip up there with number 3. So it wasn't his education that gave him his views on social reform. It was his experience of poverty. That's why it's number 1, not number 3. Okay. Okay, guys, you've done brilliantly so far. What a great way to recap the plot and context. Here is our final activity. It's a cloze activity, all right? All of the vocabulary that's missing there, we have spoken about during today's lesson, all right? So please pause the video now and complete the 2 paragraphs there by doing the gap fill task. Write out the whole paragraphs, please, but fill in those gaps as you go. Once you're done, hit play again, and I will reveal the answers to you. Good luck. Okay, are you guys ready to reveal the answers? I'm pretty sure you guys would have scored 100% on this. So let's have a look at those answers now. Fantastic. So grab your green pens and go through and mark that paragraph. Give yourself a tick every time you got one of those gap fills correct. If you didn't know any or if you missed some out, then fill them in green, please. Okay. What a great way to revise the plot and the context of A Christmas Carol. Well done, guys. Can't wait to see you again next time.